All right. Andreau Charles, welcome to the Gyaff podcast. Thank you so much again for being here. It's an honor to have you on. Jared and I, and especially me, I'm always so hungry for professionals in various fields. And, you and I have had a few conversations leading up to this. I thought you would be a great fit to come on. You're Guyanese, which makes you so, it's such a, and your expertise as being a Guyanese is something we need right now. Before we get into the long talk and we're about to, embark on, could you please, for our viewership, just give us a very brief synopsis of who you are, what you do, and what your plans are, what your goals are.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alex, for having me on the Gyaff podcast. As you said, I am Andreau Charles. I'm Guyanese by birth, and I reside in the United States, based in New York. I have a psychotherapy practice that is depth-oriented. It's based on the psychology of Carl Jung, and I am interested in working with elements from the shadow personality, things that we repress, we reject, we put aside, that we don't want to pay attention to. And we see various elements of the shadow manifesting in society. Well, here in Guyana, there is various elements of shadow personality, shadow material that is present in the society. And one of the things that, one of the ways in which the shadow manifests is through aggression and violence, and more so violence against women.
So I'm just going to interject quickly. Could you just, and this is just from my ignorance, could you just say what exactly is the shadow personality? What is that, if you were to describe that?
So Carl Jung tells us that the shadow represents everything that we find to not be good for ourselves. So everything that is unwanted, right? We reject it or we project it out to someone else. We cut it off from ourselves. We turn away from it. I'll give you some examples of what the shadow may look like in an individual. So a person may have an issue with anger, right? And instead of looking at the cause of the anger, how the anger manifests in them, they deny that they have anger, but they project that denial onto someone else. So, for example, if I were that person, I would have project my anger onto you. So I would say, no, I'm not angry, but Alex is the one who is angry, right? I would not want to acknowledge the existence of my anger. What happens there is that that part of myself goes into a place of unknownness to me, right? And it manifests. So it can manifest in different types of ways. It can manifest in the way in which I behave towards my partner, right, or my children. If I have a business, the way in which I behave towards my employees, by treating them with aggression, right, or rage. And the fact is, I may not acknowledge that this is what I am doing, all right? For me, it is as if, oh, this is not happening. So I'm very much interested in looking at that in the individual and helping that person to see, to face the shadow material that is present in them so that whatever it is that needs to be integrated for them to become whole and healthy, we can work on that.
Right.
This is the first person in Guyana I've ever come across that has discussed Jungian techniques with regards to behavioral psychology. I don't think I've ever met anyone else that has used. You're familiar with Carl Jung?
I was just about to ask, are you familiar? I'm not.
Absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He's one of the Freud Jung. He's one of the founders of behavioral psychology with deeper understanding as to with what he was talking about with shadow material, where what is it? The id, the ego, and then you repress, and down here is the shadow, which is all of the bad shit that you want to set aside, put aside, that eventually starts peeking out under times of extreme stress or extreme pressure. That so you ask yourself, well, which is the real Alex? Is it the ego and the it up at the top there, or is Alex the shadow down at the bottom that just wants to,
The parts of me that I'm not willing to acknowledge or accept, is that it?
The
It still
parts
sort of
of-
feels
the
like a
parts
form
of
of
us-
shame.
accepting the shadow, accepting that there is a shadow is one of the keys. In it, Doc. I don't want to overtalk. This is a layman.
And just to have one
This
acknowledgement.
is 3 psychology classes in university talking here, which was 20 years
so
ago.
I have some clarifications to make.
Please.
So firstly, the psychology of Carl Jung is not behavioral, it's analytical, in that we are looking at the unconscious and how the unconscious manifest in the individual. We're looking at the unconscious at the individual level, at the collective level, and also at the cultural level. So we'll talk a little bit more about the unconscious in Guyanese terms at the cultural level here.
Okay.
Yeah.
It speaks to your self-awareness.
So that's the first thing that I wanted to clarify. The second thing is with Carl Jung and Jungian psychology, we're not looking at the id. That's not something that we look at. We look at the shadow, as you pointed out. We look at the ego, and we look at how archetypal elements are present within the individual psyche and how it manifests. So there's a lot that we can go into in terms of talking about that.
Where do we start?
it blows your mind.
This is my question.
Yeah.
Where do we even start?
Yeah.
Because I'm coming. So, and a lot of what you said, by the way, to me personally, I feel like a lot of that is there. And I over the years, I will say, and I want to give myself credit, I've learned as a man to be more open to my emotions, to try and figure out who I am, my shortcomings, acknowledge that they're not going to be healed. They're always there. But I manage them, and I try to manage it in such a way that it makes me the whole person I want to be. That's how I see it. But how do we even start this discussion with someone who may not have any awareness with regards to that? And then, who's to convince them that their shadow self is this? Or is it just getting them to acknowledge a shadow self? Where do we start here?
Okay, that's a very good question. How do we start? Well, first, we have to acknowledge that the shadow exists.
Okay.
And it exists in various ways. It exists at the personal level. It exists at the collective level and also the cultural level. I'll give you an example, moving away from Guyana, in terms of how the cultural shadow exists in Europe. And this is in relation to the Jewish Holocaust, where we know a little bit about Hitler and the Third Reich.
Yeah.
And their aim, their desire was to ensure and to perpetuate their superiority. And for them, Jews, black people, Freemasons, gays, etc., were considered inferior, and they were to be eradicated. Now, that was Hitler's idea. And while Hitler was thinking about this and he had this ideology, normal people who were Jewish were contributing to the same types of things that Hitler was promoting in Germany at the time. And so what we find is that we had a situation where the shadow of Hitler was so big that it infected the entire country, or a large majority of the country. And that happened at a cultural and national level.
Okay.
So let's bring it back to Guyana.
Yeah.
What we are seeing in Guyana is we are not acknowledging the ills in our country. We're not acknowledging the dysfunction in our country in a way that helps us to address those issues that are causing men to go berserk and kill, injure, or maim their significant other and their families. We're not acknowledging the deep frustration that Guyanese people experience, that they will take their motor vehicle and drive it on the roads very recklessly to cause harm to themselves and to others. Look, just yesterday, I think there was a huge accident right out on the East Coast.
Montrose.
Yes, right out there. So there's this unacknowledged way of being in Guyana that needs to be addressed.
Well, that wasn't necessarily road rage. That was the car was in the left lane, turned into the truck's lane.
Yeah, but
the
he's
right
just
lane.
talking about how numb we are.
But I'm talking about how we are not even conscious of what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're just operating automatically,
Yeah.
right? And below that automatic way of operating, there's various elements of things that need to come out, and they're coming out in aggression. They're coming out in ways that cause death and mayhem.
Yeah. I just want to, and I'll let you jump in for a sec, but, you know, I totally see that because and strangely enough, you brought up the road and the car situation. When I'm on the road and someone cuts me off, or I'm not getting out of the way fast enough for someone to be able to cut me off, frankly, that person will, or if there's any confrontation, that person will wind down the window and start screaming at me and telling me about Guyanese with, you know, about your mother so and so, right?
Yes.
And I think that's like the core of what you're talking about, that sort of projection where any form of reasoning goes out the window. It's sort of the shadow self comes out to just totally blanket the situation. It's all about my reaction, but there's no thought about what exactly happened, who's right and wrong. I actually got into with the thing the other day. I was crossing the road. A guy is coming through an intersection with 4 traffic lights.
Yes.
I'm crossing the road and he tries to beat me to pass before I hit the other side of the road.
Yeah.
And he barely swerves out of the way. I barely swerve out of the way, and he hits me with the mirror. The mirror just smashes off. And, you know, I get angry, obviously, and I go up to the car and I'm like, you know, man, and I was heated, and I don't know if this is my shadow self or my anger, but I came out and I thought I had reason. I said, bro, you
But
could've-"
clearly you were angry.
I'm very angry. I said, bro, you nearly could have effing killed me.
You would have fucking killed me, Bana. You would have fucking killed me.
And he looks at me and he's upset that I inconvenienced him by crossing the road, and now he hit me and broke his mirror off. And he turns to me and he just says, I should have killed you in true. You know?
Did he say that?
Yeah, I sent you the video. Maybe we'll play it on this,
Yeah.
whatever. But
You would have fucking killed me. Should have killed you for truth. You should have killed me.
I mean, it's just like that sort of thing is dominates our society.
Yes.
But then, Alex, the happy ending to that story is that when you got him to the police station and you spoke to him, you said, he's actually not a bad guy.
Yeah.
It was just in that moment, his shadow material that Andrew
Andrew.
is speaking of overtook.
Yeah.
And
100%. Because when I
like-
confronted him, I went to the police.
Yeah.
The police got him in the station and we spoke man to man. And look, and even by the way, even in me going to the station and doing all the things to get some sort of justice,
Yes.
I didn't hate him. I didn't think I want to kill him. I want to hurt him. I was just completely driven by the fact that I could have lost my life.
In
and
the moment.
And there's something
Yeah.
that I need to do to regain power over my life.
Yes.
I don't want him to go to jail. I don't want him to get knocked down, but I just want some sort of control over my life. And to me, I thought that was progress, because a couple of years ago, I would have wanted to kill him. You know, I wanted to hurt him, but I just didn't really feel that. But anyway, so that's my long story short. I think that's kind of like an example of the shadow self. And we've all been guilty as men,
Yes.
you know, projecting that. But you're right. It is very heavily cultural here in Guyana.
Yeah.
How would you suggest we start addressing that other than doing things like this? I mean, how do men in particular understand and are able to rationalize, life in a way that can acknowledge that.
Yes. Basic, simple response to that is for us to acknowledge that we have a problem, right? That we're operating in a society that is not healthy, psychologically healthy, and we are ourselves are experiencing things that can make us dysregulated and fragmented, right? So we first have to acknowledge that. The second thing is that we have to seek spaces. Aside from this, you can talk to friends, friends who are like-minded and who have the emotional sensitivity and the emotional constitution to have conversations about what is happening at a deep level. Not, hey man, I just want to, those surface conversations, right? Let's just meet up for a drink.
Yeah.
And you're talking about things that they don't really make much sense, right? It's not impacting your life. It's not giving you a space for you to grow, right? You're just, in those instances, the individual is just using that space to drink and to consume alcohol. So Guyanese love to drink. We love to consume alcohol. It's part of our culture. And what I find in the research is that there's a great majority of Guyanese people, men including, who are addicted to alcohol, substance abuse. And they are experiencing alcohol-induced psychosis, right? They may also experience alcohol-induced rage, and that can lead to homicide or suicide, depending on the degree to which the person has some safety structures in place to prevent them from causing harm to themselves or harm to others while intoxicated.
Okay.
Right?
Alcohol is such a it's such a funny thing to touch on. My dad was an alcoholic. He died at 67 from alcohol related injuries, and he was. I always say there's two types of drunks. There's angry drunks and there's teddy bear drunks. There's the guys or the girls that will drink and they want to fight. They wanna get that rage out, and then there's the ones that will drink and they want to hug everyone and kiss everyone and tell everyone how much they love them and that sort of thing. Those are the two types of alcoholics or the two types of drinkers that I've seen in terms of how alcohol affects you. You know.
Yes.
So I think in terms of Guyana being cultural drinkers, I think there's a lot of societies around the world that drink culture, the Chinese, the Indians, the Irish, English people, I mean, alcohol consumption is widespread around the world. But just in terms of its reaction on someone and how it literally can bring out the absolute worst in someone and turn people, I mean, we know people that you see them after they start having a certain amount of drinks, the personality changes. They are a different person, and to some extent they are unmanageable. And these are the people who absolutely should not drink alcohol at all. They should not. You need to stay away from alcohol if in my opinion, or be aware as you're talking about of your inabilities to manage your alcohol and self-moderate, or have people around you who can tell you, dude, don't drink anymore, just ease up.
Like, what is the cutoff point?
People
for this
take that
individual?
personally though. When you tell them don't drink no more, they take that as a personal insult.
Yes.
And they get even more upset and they try to drink more to show you, oh no, bro, I'm fine. I can manage my alcohol,
I can appreciate the fact that there are other countries and cultures that consume alcohol. I understand that. I know that. I myself consume alcohol. At the moment, I'm not, right? And what I would say about Guyana in particular, and more so alcohol in a sense, is that alcohol is it's called an artificial spirit. And so what happens when we consume that, and so it's an artificial spirit, and it is used for some of us, for us to become alive, right? And there are parts of us that are in the shadow that when we consume alcohol becomes alive and activated. And that's where you may see someone who has that power complex in them.
Yeah.
We call liquid courage, right?
Yeah.
They want to turn the whole table upside down, or they want to drink more than you, right? So there's no limitations when you are at a place where you're so.
The old man was a real passive drunk. He was happy, smiley, wanted to tell jokes, wanted to hang out. Never that. I've never seen that under alcohol. I've never seen the rage part of it come out under alcohol. And what I'm saying, I grew up with an alcoholic. I grew up with a couple of alcoholics in my family. So, I mean, I'm accustomed to, just in terms of alcohol abuse, I mean, I can speak to it just from a third-hand point of view.
Yeah.
You know, I myself I wouldn't say I've struggled with substance abuse, but I definitely have come to the point where I've said to myself, Jared, you need to eat cigarettes, alcohol, cannabis to some extent. You know, you look at your consumption from at one point, you look at yourself from the outside, and you look at your consumption and you say, brother, you need to back off on this a little bit, you know?
Andrew,
But that's very good for you to have had that experience, right? Whereby you were able to see yourself from a distance and to talk, acknowledge that there is something happening here and you need to stop.
Oh no, there needs to be a physical manifestation before I stop. Like the cigarettes is when I had gone out for a run, had gotten into running, went out for a run, probably made it from Kingston to Marion Academy and bent over wheezing, couldn't breathe because I was out the night before having a few. And you know, cigarette smokers will tell you this. When you're drinking, you smoke more. You run through cigarettes like nothing because it's I guess it's something to do with your hand or whatever it is. Anyway, went home, took the cigarettes under the sink. And that was the end of that. That was, you know, didn't cut that out.
going back to your point about how the spirit is used to suppress the issue, and you talked about the shallow social. The shallow social methods of how men especially deal with problems involving alcohol. And that's part of our culture. And I agree with you. But going even beyond that, is it also the fact that, and in my opinion, is that most men, and I think, and I don't usually big us up, but I think you and I are outliers, is that a lot of men just don't have the ability to get to the point of, Jared, you know, this thing has been bothering me. It makes me feel this way. I, as a man, it threatens my security as a man. This is how I feel. I open up to you. I'm vulnerable. I give myself to this forum. Hold on, let me finish.
Sure.
So you know, and I think the problem is that in our culture makes me less of a man. You know, and that's the kind of train of thought that men in our society have, is that if I open up, if I don't show that, man, there's nothing, man, let me go and beat some rum, let me go and drink, and I'm not a man because I can't deal with my shit, you know? Yeah. So I think in a culture that is just incapable of getting there, and I don't know who to assign the blame to, but how do you even go about, what's the starting point for that? Because if a man is not a man when he does this, then how are you getting him to find that place, to even acknowledge the shadow?
Yeah, but
Doc, sorry, just to add on what Alex was saying, and I'll let you, just to add on to that, I got a question for you. Do you think perhaps your opening up to me is a manifestation of your self-admission of the issue? Meaning, it's like a confirmation.
Of course.
So perhaps...
But you're my safe space.
So perhaps what the conversation needs to go to, and Doc touched on it briefly, is men having that safe space, because they're not going to go and tell their wife, hey babe, XYZ, because then there's this perception of weakness in it.
You're no longer the protector of the house.
You need to be the brick. You need to be the infallible. And the second you admit infallibility, well, then you're automatically weaker and or less of a man in her eyes.
Even though, by the way, and just to thing on that, and sorry for excluding you for the conversation. I feel like this
I'm
is
right
just a,
here, but
a
just
bump
be
symbol.
honest, yeah.
I'm right
Jump
here.
in whenever you want.
I forget you're here.
I think I've
Absolutely.
said it before, like what is needed, and you're just marinating.
Just one last point on that. As you brought another point, and we can't even let this man speak. Even though my wife is my everything,
Yes.
and I totally trust her with how I feel, and she knows me better than anyone else, I still have that insecurity because it does make me feel
Absolutely.
vulnerable, like I should have my stuff together as the man of the house. So I run away and I go and drink with Jared and open up to him. But in theory, I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's like necessarily a bad thing to feel this way. I'm not saying it's a problem, but I'm just saying it's how I feel.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of my point. So how do we help men to get to where they need to be? If they can't, if they just, culturally can't.
All right. So there are a few things. One, we have to remember that we're operating in a patriarchal society, whereby, and in patriarchy empowers some men, not all, some men to have access to power. And those men who have access to power subjugate men and women who don't have the power that they possess. Okay? So men in general who are raised in a patriarchal society such as Guyana are raised and taught that they are the one who possess the power, right? The power to own property, the power to own the woman, and the power to own others. And any deviation from that, anything that threatens the power that this man possesses, he would want to crush it or want to discard of it to maintain his power. Okay, so that's...
Doc, you think that still holds true?
It
That
holds
that
true.
100%.
You and I
holds true
both grew up
in-
in matriarchal
I
families.
know, but let's stick
It
to
holds
let's
true.
stick
I
to
am
the issue.
talking
Let's stick to
about
the issue for a
the
second.
Guyanese society. Well, there are differences.
Sometimes I feel that you kind of paint with a broad brush, you know?
I'm talking here about a national cultural identity and issues. So I am painting with a broad brush here, in a sense.
Yeah.
But there are examples of there are anomalies in the society whereby those things may not apply. However, when we're talking about the psyche of the individual, the psyche of the individual is predicated upon the culture in which the person was raised in, despite the fact that they may have certain experiences that may be a little bit adjacent to the dominant culture. They still exist in that dominant patriarchal culture.
110%, and I totally agree with you here. And even myself, who I think was raised fairly privileged, what you just said there is totally how I felt at a certain point in my life as a young man. I played sports, so it's also prevalent in that kind of environment as well.
Yes.
Where it's like, you're threatened by something that will devalue your self-worth. So therefore, I need to crush it. I need to destroy it.
Yes.
And I remember a close friend of mine who I won't mention his name, and he's one of my close friends, and I do love him. But him and I had a very tumultuous relationship because we were both very competitive. And I think the easiness of being threatened by each other in our successes that had nothing to do with our own paths.
Yes.
There was a need to poke and prod and go back and forth. And I see that happening with men as well. You see that happen in business as well. People who are threatened or feel like they're threatened. And the irony is that it's actually more in small businesses than big ones. The mindset is, I opened an ice cream shop. Oh God, Jared opened an ice cream shop too. Let me like do what I can to make sure I stop his growth and not really focus on mine.
Yes.
And we see that in our culture as well, I think. I think that's kind of what you're talking about. And Yeah, so I definitely relate to that. It is a cultural thing that I never understood. It's like it's a crab in a barrel mentality to me. That's what I see.
So I want to give some more meat to answer the question you asked about what to do. So one is to recognize we're operating in a society that is patriarchal and is structured around power. That certain men have power, and men in general perceive themselves to have power over women, and so they would want to exude the power to maintain it in many different ways. And below that, underneath this question of power, is deep insecurity. Because, as you were saying just now, what men don't have is a safe space or spaces where they can just be a human being, right? Without having to compete for power or resources. And so what happens is that the man who doesn't have the resource or the power, he sometimes feels as though he is worthless, that he has no value. And he would may sometimes project that worthlessness onto his woman, onto the female in the home, right? And he would treat her in such a way that maintain the idea that she is worthless, that she has no power. So one, we need to have those spaces whereby you can come and talk to each other about real issues, real problems. Look, I am feeling this particular way, right? Or I'm having this thought. Here, I had this example a few days ago. I went to a ministry of government, and I came out of the ministry, and there was someone selling snow cone, right? It was just around the time where we had that incident where the guy shot his ex-wife, I think like 13 times.
And the kid.
And the child on the street, in Charlotte Street. It was just around that time.
Then himself.
And killed himself. So I went to the snow cone cart, and I was overhearing this guy talking about his experience that he had. He was at a place where he was paranoid, thinking that everyone in the home was against him, including his wife. And there was some validity to part of it, right? And something inside of him told him that, no, this thought is destructive and I need to get help. And he went out and sought help. He saw the psychiatrist, he got on medication, he sought counseling, he ended up exiting that environment, and he's doing well in terms of being a healthy person on the streets of Georgetown. I was able to give him a handshake. So we want to have places where an individual in that state can go and tell his friend or her buddy or someone he feels comfortable with, like, these are the thoughts that I have. And that person must have the understanding and the sense to listen and to help that individual who is in such a crisis situation, to help them out of it, to help to guide them to where he can get the right answers by seeking someone professional, right? He sought out someone professional. So we need to have those types of things. What we also need, we need to have in the home, we need parents to raise your children with more love, compassion, and grace for each other, and to normalize feelings in men, rather than telling men that it's not okay for you to cry, it's not okay for you to feel. You're being girl, you're being cis, you're being an anti-man because you have these types of feelings, right, that you're expressing. No, that is not helpful.
Doc, I just want to make one comment here, because it seems that your narrative is mostly directed towards what men do and what men can do. Mm-hmm. And just to play devil's advocate for a second, and I'm not recusing, there are some absolute fucking animals out there in this world that really and truly, I don't know how they manage to get to the point of even getting married to a woman or making children, because they are absolute animals. And those are the people I think that should be put on Mazruni Island and locked away forever and ever and ever.
And you're referring to men and women here?
I'm referring to men and women, but specifically what I wanted to ask you is, do you believe that the partner, the female partner, plays some amount of role in the escalation of some of these issues? I sometimes find it hard to believe that people will wake up one day, just look across at their wife and just start wailing on her or just start shooting her. My question is, what role do women play in, especially when it comes to gender-based violence? Only because I'm hearing you specifically addressing, what men do and what men can do and what men should do. But, I'm in a happy, committed relationship right now with a lovely woman who understands me. But I have been in relationships with very, very difficult women who will push your buttons and who will, push you to the next level. And for some men, I understand that if you do not have some amount of self-awareness and some amount of self-control, how that provocation can push you over the edge. And again, I'm going to get flack for this, and I'm not by any means of the word justifying what happens. I'm just saying that there is some kind of lead up that gets people to that stage. Now, you said earlier that the snow cone man, went to therapy, got medication, and then 3 left the situation.
Yes.
Me personally, I unfollow people in real life, brother. If you're not actively contributing to my life and my well-being, I will unfollow you because you're not good company. You're not a good place. And I think for me, what I would advocate is men just being aware of your situation before it all goes to hell and saying, look it, man, I need to walk away. But don't allow yourself to perhaps let someone get you to the point where you're tripping out. If you see that you're on the road towards tripping out, dude, walk away. That situation. I was telling Kelsey that situation with the guy where he shot his wife and his kid. And this is obviously very, very sensitive. And, I don't want to offend anyone by addressing the matter. But it begs the question, was shooting the woman and the child secondary to the suicide that he planned on anyway? Had he planned on killing himself anyway, and he said to himself, well, I'm going to take them out with me. Was it secondary, or was it murder first and then suicide afterwards? And that, you understand where I'm going with this? And just from an outside perspective, I looked at it and I said to Kelsey, I said, love, he was waiting in the car. He was going to kill himself anyway. This was planned. This wasn't spur of the moment. This wasn't, his plan was to kill himself, and he was taking that was secondary. Taking the woman and the child out was secondary. And today is World Suicide Prevention Day. Guyana's, one of our claims to fame, is the highest suicide rate, but that's per capita, no? And
Yes,
I mean, we have a
per
small population, but again, going back to your platform of self-awareness, and you really need to, I think men really need to be aware of when they start getting those suicidal thoughts, or they start getting those very, very dangerous thoughts, to remove themselves from whatever situation they're in and try and find a safe space where they can get some amount of clarity, somebody's kitchen table where you can sit and
But that doesn't address. Sorry, and I'll let you answer.
So thank you.
I didn't mean to address. I'm just added material.
Well,
okay.
I think you need to. That's fine. Sorry.
Yeah.
One last thing.
We do this.
Pose no, but let's not get carried away in just statements. Pose a question.
But there was
Yeah.
a question. The question was about responsibility, whether or not
What
the
is
woman
the partner's
has
role?
a responsibility
Yeah.
or a role in
De-escalating.
or elevating the violence in the home. Well, I'm going to answer that question, and I'm also going to talk about the shooting. What we know from the data is that women usually commit suicide and she leaves the children and the home, right? In domestic violence situation or issues of severe mental health issues, the woman would commit suicide.
Mm-hmm.
She would kill herself rather than killing everyone. On the other hand, the man, he kills everyone. He kills the children, he kills the wife, and he kills himself. And that's because of the shadow material things that I talked about earlier, right? So that's clear.
The women don't address the shadow?
Women, in terms of addressing the shadow, she's more concerned about what will happen to her children, right? She's not so wounded and narcissistic and violent that she's going to kill everyone in the home. She kills herself. That's what we know. In terms of her role in escalating violence, yes, there are some women.
No. Not necessarily her role in escalating violence. It was, what is the partner's role in de-escalating a situation before it leads to violence?
Okay. What's the partner's role in de-escalating or escalating violence in certain situations? Because I just don't want to talk about one area.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, the woman has a role, yes. And sometimes what we know is that while she may make efforts to de-escalate that will be unhelpful, on the other hand, there are times when the woman is so antagonistic towards her partner that she would prod him, she would poke and prod him in those places that he's deeply wounded and sensitive. And he responds with narcissistic rage. That rage comes out where he kills her, he kills the children, and he kills himself because he's not concerned about anyone. He is just concerned about seeking vengeance in that moment in time. Now, yes, if you are in a situation where there's heightened tension and pressure, you would want to walk away from it if you can, right? If you can walk away from it, you try your best to walk away from it. But what we know is that these men who are narcissistic and wounded, not all men, right? Who are narcissistic and wounded, who are in that power complex and feel as though they own the woman, is as if to say she has no freedom. She cannot leave me. She cannot go and start a new life. She belonged to me, and I'm going to take her life, and then I take mine. That's what we see happening in the society. I am not looking to make any justification. I'm pointing out how the shadow manifests in our country and ways in which we need to acknowledge and address it.
Yeah. Just to address your point quickly, and I get where you're coming from, but I think, again, we can't look at it as like, oh, well, what's her role, in it? Like, how much percentage did she contribute to the situation versus him? And like assigning that blame, you know what I mean? I think it's more, we're obviously on the thread of men because, this is kind of our forum. We don't have a woman here where I think, you and I can sit down here and just...
Vicky, what are your thoughts on this situation?
I don't think you and I could just sit down here and talk about that right now. But I also do think that, recognizing the shadow self, recognizing these things, there has to be some level of, I need to walk away. Even if in our friendship, we get in a situation where the relationship becomes so, confrontational, toxic, whatever. We either could shoot each other and get it over with, or we could walk away. We could unfollow. But it's like, at what point do I always have the responsibility of how much I'm willing to expose myself to mental trauma dealing with you or whatever. So I think like it's recognizing that in a way. I can't put that on you.
Yeah.
I can't say, oh well, Jared drove me to shoot him in the face. You know what I mean? Like I
Alex,
have
are
to
you
preserve.
saying that there's some tension between the two of you that you guys
Always.
need to work
Yes,
through?
he just interrupts me too much. He constantly is
Constant
interrupting
tension,
me in this
constant
podcast.
tension.
So what's the power issue here? What's
what's funny about that is no, I sometimes the reason I pose the question is because I just, in terms of just broadening the conversation a little bit, and I like to play devil's advocate.
That's
and,
fine.
No, I thought it was very relevant.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought it was very relevant because that's how most men in our culture would think. Will she drive me to do it? So it's a very relevant question. I look at the question as, I just wanted to clarify that from my stance, but I thought it was relevant.
Yeah.
It doesn't come across as a nice question. It sounds like you're an insensitive asshole.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I totally understand why you asked it.
Are you married?
No, I'm not.
Have you been in a lot of relationships, like with different personalities, where you can, I have dated some personalities, and
Well, I'm a therapist, and I treat people with different types of personality issues.
No, but outside your profession, yeah.
And the work that we do in therapy is relational, right? So that's what I'll say to answering the question.
The reason I'm asking is because I have had personal relationships as well as just social relationships where you start to see different archetypal personality traits coming out within different people. And after a while, if you just take the time to look back and just take a step back and look at someone for their nature, what they are, who they are, you begin to see different categories, and you can now put them into categories and say, okay, well, this is their nature, this is how they are, this is the type of person that they are. And you know what? Maybe they will find that yang that fits with them, but I ain't their yang,
Yes, yeah.
I mean, I am lucky, I believe, to have found my yang many, many years later. But just in terms of being in a relationship and co-managing the other person's personality traits, the other person's shadow, that is their nature, that is their shadow, eventually that shit's gonna bubble up and come to the top.
Yes.
I think in terms of managing relationships and not allowing it to escalate to a point where it is untenable, you need to understand not just your shadow, but the other person's shadow. Does that make sense?
Well, you need to understand what triggers the individual, because I don't think the person may know what their shadow is because it's somewhat unknown to them.
Yeah.
But you need to know, in relationship with the other, you need to know what triggers your partner. And if it is that you are poking at the trigger, you are going to get a triggered response. And that response may be one of, okay, I'm just shutting down. I'm going to go into a place of depressive collapse and I stonewall you. I'm not going to engage with you, right? That's one response. The other response would be that, okay, I may hit you, all right? Or I may ignore you and I may not cook for you, or there's so many different ways in which an individual can respond
Sure.
when they're triggered.
Or you
right?
could say things you can't take back.
And you say things that you
Words
you
hurt,
want,
man.
You
Words
want to. Sometimes what happens when you're triggered is that you want to hurt the other, to let them feel the pain that you're feeling.
Yeah.
Right. You want to punch them in the gut, but you're not actually doing the punching physically. You're using it with words. And what happens with women? They are not able to punch us in the gut because they don't have that physical strength. Some women. So they use their words. And their words are so sharp that it pierces us. Let me tell you what I do with men who have these issues. And a lot of men experience it. In okay relationships, has nothing to do with domestic violence. Woman tells the man, you didn't take out the trash, right? And and for her telling him you didn't take out the trash today reminds him of something that was wounding for him, right? And she says, oh, you never do anything right. Oh, you never do anything right. But what she's doing in that moment is that she's punching him in the gut to say, you didn't take out the trash today, and I'm going to beat you up for it.
Generalize.
Yeah. I'm
Absolutely.
going to beat you up
You
for
always
it.
do
You're
this.
not doing
Absolutely.
anything right. And so for him, he feels as though he's worthless and so on. So what I tell men to do, I said, pick an image and use it as an armor and put it on. And so when she engages in battle, because it's a battle, when she engages in battle, you know that you're not going to be wounded in that moment.
Yeah.
She tells you that you didn't take out the trash and you never do anything right, put up your armor. but it has to be something that is cyclical. You pick the image. Say, give me an image of something that you can use as an armor.
I feel like this is really putting me on the spot. I feel like maybe
What's your happy place, man?
My happy place would be
Not in a happy place.
sorry,
An image.
An image as in of me. Am I in the image?
Okay, so here's it. When I say pick an image, what I'm encouraging men to do is to take something that they imagine from their imagination that they can put on,
Yeah.
right? They put on to make them strong in that moment.
For me, I would probably put something as like, I am in a way, and this is maybe not a good or bad thing because I have family members who've done this to a fault, but I would put myself as like a martyr who's taking this for the greater good of my family, and therefore I must do it.
No. That's not recommended. You don't put yourself as a martyr. You're gonna get a lot of pain.
Yeah.
And so that armor does, it protects you.
But then, so give me an example of the armor. What is that?
So, for example, one person put on the chest plate, the Roman chest plate.
Oh, so this has to be
actual
like a
armor.
metaphorical. This has to be a metaphorical thing.
Yeah, there's an
Yeah.
image that you're bringing from your.
Right. See, where I went just now was I'm adding to my pain and I'm being the victim. I'm further victimizing myself maybe
Yes,
there.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's what you're doing in that sense.
I just
I
want to
think
pause
further
quickly.
discussion is necessary.
So let's have part 2 of this episode. Sorry. So I just want to, one thing I want to just make clear is that, and thank you for having these open discussions, and you too. I know this is hard for you. I want to make clear that these are normal things in any relationship. Your relationship could be good, it could be bad, it could be medium, but couples, especially men and women, go through these things to some degree and have to figure out how to deal with it.
Yes.
I don't want people to think that, oh, these are all like terrible relationships, because we just came out talking about like domestic suicides and homicides and stuff. But this is just relationships and how people deal with it. I just want to make that clear to everyone. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes,
So you put on this sort of mental armor where you're in a position that, nothing can hurt me?
Not nothing. Her words, what she's doing in this fight, she's punching me, but it's not going to penetrate. I can take it. Rather than I be so wounded in the moment that I have to respond with rage, right? That I have to hurt her in return, physically.
You know what's, I think sometimes we, with regards to the thing with taking out the trash, and I'll give you an example of this, I think sometimes we are oblivious that everyone's fighting their own battle and fighting their own demons and fighting to keep that shadow down. And I'll give you an example. You know, a guy goes to work, and on the way to work, the tire that he was supposed to fix gets a blowout. So he's late for work, goes into work. You know, his boss is on his ass all day and he's getting ragged out. Drives home and walks into his safe space, forgot to take the trash out that morning. And the wife says to him, "You didn't take the trash out. You can't do anything right." And that is that. She doesn't know what happened that day, but he is literally here. He's bubbling. He's boiling over. Yeah. And that simple statement, "You can't do anything right," as simple as it is just that trigger, and he trips because he's finally like, walks in the door, "Oh, all right, this is safe space." And then there's more shit coming at you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and this goes back to what I was talking about earlier with not just self-awareness, but awareness of the people in your space also, and understand that everyone's dealing with their own shit, man. You know, I don't think there's anyone that it's just happy-go-lucky. Everything's good, you know? I think we're all constantly fighting a daily battle just to keep it together. You know, and perhaps when you see that stuff manifesting on the road, you know, Kelsey also always tells me, she says, "Babe, don't get confrontational, because you don't know when you're when you're going to pick the wrong guy to scream at or engage with, and he just loses it on you, you know, and that's terrifying, brother.
Yes.
That's terrifying, especially on our roadways. Today, I get cussed because a guy was overtaking into my lane coming towards me and I refused to move, and I get cussed for doing the right thing, for not allowing him to do the wrong thing. What do? Do I engage? Do I just let him run over me and lose that power?
You
that
put on
power
your
structure.
armor. You put on your
You
armor.
know, like, yeah. What is the, with regards to the armor that you're telling guys to put on? What is the armor that you're suggesting in either of those hypothetical situations? A, take out the trash. You're not good. You're good for nothing. Or B, you know, in traffic and busman calls you, you know, a son of a bitch because you didn't let him run over you. What is the armor that men put on in that specific instance? That's
I think we need to be able to arm ourselves to protect ourselves from these types of wounding. And the first thing is to have the awareness that we are wounded, and this particular thing is wounding me, right?
Yeah.
And so the first thing is to have the awareness that you're wounded when this thing happened, right? And so having that knowledge that, okay, and when it's happening in the moment, that's when you put on the armor. So you have to figure out for yourself what type of image you can hold that you can utilize in that moment. Because what happens there, when you are triggered, the ego is in a place where it wants to fight. It wants to affirm itself, right? And it wants to survive in that moment. And it's surviving in the realm of power to men, right? And so if you recognize in that moment that I'm being wounded here, yes, but I know, and having the awareness that I know I have something, I have a tool that I can utilize. You put it on. You say, fuck you. Or whatever it is you want to say. And you go about your business.
Yeah.
All right?
At least with the fuck you still get some, you still get to be a man and give it back. Because I feel like,
but Alex,
not give it back. Sorry, that was terrible choice of words. But what my point, Andrew, is that as men, I think we still have an innate nature to defend. It's
Yes.
part of our nature. We can't just turn the other
But we
cheek
must
constantly.
know when to defend. And we must
Exactly.
know what tools to
but
utilize.
my point is the fuck you is just I've written you off. Goodbye. I'm the bigger man in this situation. Move on.
That's
right?
one way.
I'm not saying actually to tell him
Yes.
to F you, you know, but you know, but I think like it's important to not. While I agree with everything you're saying and understand and try to put these practices in myself, I think we cannot fully strip away this this traditional idea of being a man as well. Like there has to be some balance where I can still represent myself. I could still, I'm just not here taking.
Alex, I'm going to stop you because what I'm hearing in this, what I'm hearing you say is that we are not men until we use violence and aggression.
It's not violence. It's not violence.
Violence and aggression to bring about a balance of power. And violence and aggression is needed, but not all the time.
Agreed.
It's not all the time that it's needed. And that doesn't make us
It's more like a one-up, Doc. It's more than, as opposed to violence and power, it's the need to one-up the other person to maintain that power balance.
That's a way of
I is a
saying,
bigger man than you. I has more power than you. But not necessarily with your fist, not necessarily
it's
with
all
your words.
bullshit. All of that is
Yeah.
bullshit. All right? Because it makes you not less of a man. If you know who you are, right? If you're comfortable with who you are, if you value yourself, right? And you can stand in a place where you have that foundation, you don't care about all these other things. If he says that you're not a man because you don't cuss him out or whatnot, or you yourself didn't respond with aggression and violence, somebody may say that you're not a man. Okay. But you know the truth, right? So we don't necessarily need to have that particular response. We don't. The response is needed when it's appropriate. Violence and aggression is needed when it's appropriate. In that situation, if it's not appropriate, no.
When is violence and
But that's
aggression
my question.
appropriate?
That's my question.
Violence
So
and
who
aggression is
determines that?
appropriate when you have to defend yourself
Fight or
against
flight, right?
a threat.
Fight or flight, Alex.
Okay.
Fight or flight.
Right.
If you're cornered and there's no other way out, then start swinging. You know?
Doc, is this conversation going south? I just want
I'm not
to
sure.
check the pulse.
I'm
I
not
just want to
sure
check the pulse here.
where we're heading right now. But what I want to bring us back to in terms of the relationship with the other, we talked just now a little bit about triggers, right? And having that triggered response and having the awareness about it. Having the awareness is okay, but at some point, there must be some conversation and some kind of agreement as to how we are going to relate to each other, right? That it's not acceptable for you to keep, hitting me in this particular way or triggering me, right? It's not acceptable for us to do that. So what can we do together that is healthy?
Yeah.
So that there needs to be some kind of conversation and agreement. And when the agreement is breached, well, what is the consequence of that?
Yeah.
This is looking at how people relate in relationships in a healthy way. I'll give you a very simple example. Like yesterday, I was on the phone with my sister and she said something and I got upset with her. And I responded to her with, I just cut her off, right? And she told my mom how she felt. And mom called me and told me about it. And I was like, oh. I went and I apologized to my sister. Mm-hmm. And I told her that I was having this particular experience at the time. And that's why I responded that way. I am sorry. So there must be some kind of repair when a rupture is made.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I apologize for the pushback. I just feel like the pushback is important because I don't want to say, oh, this is the way everyone should do it. We need to accept this and this is the right way, because that's not how humans work,
true.
right? And so
That's
I
true.
appreciate your patience,
Yes.
but I do want to reel it back in. I don't want us to get too lost in the hypotheticals. So, and I appreciate your patience. One thing I want to move on to is, you talk a lot about this idea of narcissism in the shadow self, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, how do you define narcissism? Like, what is your sort of broad definition of it and how we as humans utilize it? Because, narcissism is many times painted as a bad thing, but it's actually, Jared and I have discussed this a bit, it also is used by many people to achieve certain things as well. And it's another complicated relationship we have. How do you define narcissism?
Okay, I'm going to go to the DSM-5
Okay.
to tell you about the definition for narcissism.
What Alex and I were talking about is how, while you get to your definition, how some amount of narcissism is probably needed and required in today's society, or throughout history, to achieve power, to achieve control. That if you look at the greatest leaders the world has ever had, they have had some amount of narcissistic personality where they say, and this is probably going to lead into your definition, but some of that shadow material to some extent has to leak out to be able to achieve that kind of personality. So just prefacing, this is what Alex and I were talking about, like how bad is it to be a narcissist, or how bad is narcissistic personality traits when it is clear that in business, in politics, in leadership, there are very, very clear narcissistic personality traits that are evident in people, and it causes people to rally around them and say, well, this is the guy that we want to follow,
Okay, I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
So
we do that.
Can you ask the question again, please?
What is your definition of narcissism? How do you?
I was trying to find the DSM information, but it's not populating.
How would you define it?
Well, narcissism, there are two types of narcissism. There is healthy narcissism or primary narcissism, which is good. It is developmental and it is needed. And then there is pathological narcissism. Pathological narcissism is defined by the DSM, where you have various types of things that are occurring. You have a grandiose sense of self-importance. Grandiose sense of self-importance, a disregard for others. You're condescending, right? You feel as though other people envy you and they want to be you. And there are some others. I can't remember all of them at the moment. And there is a lack of empathy and regard for other. So for when we talk about narcissism, we're not talking about it in a healthy way, psychologically. We're not talking a narcissistic personality disorder, rather. We're not talking about it in a healthy way. We're talking about someone who is callous, who is careless, who doesn't care for anyone else about only themselves, right? What Jung and Freud tells us is that the narcissist's libido is inwardly facing, whereby everything is centered on him rather than the society or the other. So if we were looking at a politician or people who are in business and so on, yes, they are focused on themselves in ways that enrich themselves. And it is helpful for them, yes, and for some business projects and so forth that they may be engaging in. But you know what? They're working with other people. And what we find and what we know is that they're not able to relate to the other. They're not able to share power or relationship with the other. Everything is about them, and that is destructive.
How does a person like that, and now this is kind of maybe where you come in, how does a person like that, even just based on their personality, even considers that they may need help, they may need to change, take a different approach to their own life? Because if they're so embedded in self, then that would, I feel like that's giving that gives me the feeling that they've arrived, you know, they're unflawed, they're flawless, you know, and then, you know, how are you the one to, how do you determine, oh, well, this person is a narcissist because X, Y, Z, you know what I mean? Like, how does that even, how do those two worlds even collide? How do you end up helping someone with narcissism? Who takes the first step there? And then also, who has I mean, obviously you have the authority as the treatment giver to help point out these problems and issues, but it seems like a very, who's on the higher pedestal here? You know, the power dynamic to me is a bit complicated. The road to successful recovery, it seems a bit hard, you know, with you and a narcissist, you know, trying to come together. How does that work?
Okay. I don't know how it works with someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder, because I don't work with individuals that have a narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay.
I work with individuals who would have been narcissistically wounded, and they are coming for healing. The narcissist is not going to come to a therapist for healing. The narcissist, as you said earlier about the power balance, the narcissist is going to come to the therapist to show that he or she has more power than the therapist, to say to the therapist or to discredit the therapist in lots of ways, challenge their diagnosis, to challenge the way in which they're treating them, right? To question their training and certification, to question the way in which the office is located or decorated, or lots of things happens. And so that individual is not looking for healing. That individual is looking to dominate.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for the therapist who works with narcissists in that way. I give them all the energy that they need for that purpose. For myself, no. The people who come that has a narcissistic wound,
What's a narcissistic
a
wound?
narcissistic wound happens when, like I was talking about just now, where you get punched in the gut or you get wounded, right? It's as if your value collapses, your self-importance collapse, your grandiose ideas of self collapse, right? And and politicians get narcissistically wounded quite often. Yes, and they work tremendously to maintain the illusion of their grandiosity. But I come back to the narcissistic wound. It's when you get that the deflation of the grandiosity, for you to understand that there are limitations, that you're not that big, bad, and grandiose, right? That you are a human being, that you have limitations, that you have a body, right? That you age, right? That you have to take care of yourself and all of those things. So that's the type of person I'm interested in working with. And those are the people that come into the therapy session with me and we work together. Now, how to do it? How to do it is to not engage in a power battle with the individual. No. I already know who has the power in the room, right? I already know that.
It's Vicky.
I already know who has the power in the room. And I don't need to do anything but be there and to be in partnership with that which needs healing. That's the work.
Sorry, I want to jump in on this one. Just with specific regard to narcissistic personality traits, we are taught from birth, believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. You can do this. You have the power to do this. And we try to, as much as possible, instill self-confidence in those who may not have it, and to build self-worth into those that maybe might doubt it. Yeah. And I think this kind of joins in on what Alex was asking, is who gets to decide where self-confidence ends and narcissism starts? Specifically with leaders, what we were talking about is in order to get people to believe in you, you first have to believe in yourself. You have to sell it to yourself that you are this guy. Yeah. If you have one doubt for 1 second that you're not this guy, well, then those hundreds of thousands of people are also not going to believe that you are that guy. So, and this is in business also, when you're working for a big company and things are going to hell, you look to the top. And the guy at the top is the guy that's saying, dude, I can fix this. What do you need? I can fix this. I mean, the current leader of the free world is that guy. He's the guy that is, nothing phases him, that he's infallible. I can fix it. Mm-hmm. I'm the best at this. I'm the guy to do it. And then hundreds, millions say, he's the guy to do it. Yes. He's the one. Because, my question is he just extremely self-confident? Or is he a narcissist? And who gets to say? You know what I'm saying? Who has that moral authority to brand someone as being narcissistic or just being extremely self-confident? And I maintain that I don't think all narcissistic personality traits are bad. And like you said, the ones that probably use it for evil, are not great. But I think there is some amount of the shadow material that should be allowed to leak out. In order, we all can't be passive, right? We all can't be, there needs to be a leader, and there needs to be leader ants, and there needs to be worker ants, right? So in order to be the leader ant, you need to have just something a little extra over the next guy next to you, or you're gonna get lost in the anthill, right? Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if that touches on what you were asking in the first place.
It's a good question. I think, and I'll try to give my answer if you don't mind before you answer. I'm sure you have an answer. Yeah. I feel like maybe to that would be, it's up to the person themselves to realize like they have a narcissistic wound. It's not necessarily about healing narcissism completely. I think everybody has narcissistic traits, no?
And tendencies.
Yes. I mean, you included, like as human, like we all as human beings. But it's like the point is that his job is to, once a person recognizes their narcissistic tendencies or wounds, they go to figure out how to navigate that, how to stop the hurt. Am I right?
How to get healing.
Yeah.
How to relate to
Yeah.
to others.
It's not your job to cure a
yeah,
narcissist.
yeah.
We all, I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn.
Okay. So the question you were asking about who gets to decide? Okay.
The person that wounded
yes,
you was in fact a narcissist?
Yes.
Or maybe you're just...
Well, there's a lot of talk in public domain about narcissism, and everyone is being branded a narcissist.
It's like a trend word
It's
now,
a trendy thing.
Yeah, man.
It's a trendy thing, and it's just ridiculous. Who gets to decide who is a narcissist? The person who comes into the therapy room, right? And we're using the guidelines from the DSM. That is what is
For the
used.
viewers, what's the DSM?
The Diagnostic Statistical Manual. 5, it's the Bible for mental health that all mental health clinicians use for diagnosing and also treating people with mental health disorders. So I would say we have to go to the DSM and to look at what is happening when the person comes in to the therapeutic room, all right? We know that some people in the public, especially our president, leader of the free world, my president, he is big, he is grand, he is in a place where grandiosity is needed.
That's all presidents though, right?
All presidents,
Yeah.
kings, grandiosity is needed. But that's not the only thing that is needed for you to determine that someone is a narcissist. The DSM give us more. Perhaps, and I can tell you what the DSM says, what is needed for one to say, diagnose you as a narcissistic personality disorder. You know, I work with people who work in spaces that require grandiosity, but they know that that's not the totality of who they are,
Yeah.
right? They're in a role. They are putting on the clothing of grandiosity because it is needed, and then they take it off. Because we talk about relating. The narcissist is not able to relate to the other.
Yeah.
And so that is what we find. If you want to have a healthy relationship with someone, you cannot dominate them.
Right.
The balance of power in relationships, I think, is an ongoing thing. It's a push and pull, you know? You don't want to be that guy in the relationship or that woman in the relationship where you're completely submissive and you do as your husband says or your wife rule you, you know? But there definitely needs to be some amount of balance, some amount of push and pull.
I also don't think I could be in a role where I'm 100% dominant either. I feel like that would be unattractive for me.
Yeah.
I don't find that, compelling.
Prefer to be tied up.
Okay. So I got it here. So according to the DSM, a narcissistic personality disorder is defined as a pervasive pattern of grandiosity or a need for admiration, a lack of empathy beginning in childhood and present in various contexts, right? And you need to have 5 of these criteria for one to be diagnosed with a narcissistic personality disorder. Grandiose self-importance or grandiose sense of self, preoccupation with fantasies, a belief in being special or unique, the need for excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, interpersonal exploitative behaviors, lack of empathy, envy, and arrogant, haughty behaviors or attitudes. Right?
Jesus. It's like every president ever, every leader ever. Like you need if those traits are absent, you won't survive.
all presidents operate in a place.
President is a rough generalization. I think just leaders in general, those are the personality traits that are necessary. I mean, I don't think we would have had Alexander the Great if he didn't have those tendencies. We wouldn't have had Julius Caesar if we didn't have those tendencies. We wouldn't have had,
But I
think about.
I want to put a caution here. While they were great leaders, yes, look at the amount of destruction that they did.
Shape the world, man.
To society, though, look at the destruction. And we...
So that's the empathy,
ways,
that's the lack of empathy
the lack of
that they would
empathy.
have needed in order to get done what they done.
Yes, they operated in that place, as you're saying,
Yeah.
where they had no care or regard for the other, including the environment.
Yeah.
And I am, as a clinician, I cannot endorse that type of personality as though it is normal, because it is not. It is not a normal way of being. And so I must point that out. However, I'll acknowledge that people who are operating at that level oftentimes embody the narcissistic personality structure or narcissistic personality. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Is there anything, we're almost at our time, but is there anything that, we spoke a lot about the narcissism and then our, interpersonal relationships, issues with men, shadow self. Is there anything that we've not touched on that you think is also important, speaking in this realm of these sort of human behaviors that you think it's important that we maybe can close on?
Yes, I think the thing that we didn't touch on and is fitting for me to close on this is care and compassion. That we operate in a society that seems to lack care and compassion. Care and compassion for ourselves in many ways and for the other. And for our society or our culture to be healthy, care, compassion, and grace is also needed. Yes.
I want to say one thing on that is that, I think care and compassion for self is a big thing, especially with men, because I think we are, too hard on ourselves. And I think it's part of all those feelings of anger and dominance and those aggressive, violent feelings that we spoke about that seem natural, that seem to define who we are.
Yes.
We aren't soft on ourselves. And I still struggle with that every day. I feel like I'm getting better. Sometimes I think I'm worse.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's like I did have an epiphany the other day when I was hiking, and I just, for the first time in probably ever, I just was in my thoughts, and I felt like, I just said to myself, you are enough. And I think that's something I'm not saying we should say it all the time, but I think it's good to acknowledge that. Because as men, it's always more. What can I do? How can I do this stronger, faster, better? We have that pressure. So I think it's good. Care and compassion is good. And especially, luckily I have friends like Jared who, I care about and I can be open with and free with. And I think that's maybe relationships we can sort of continue to foster in society. We do some drinking, which is a blanket for a lot of things, but I think, there's a way to do both and then eventually not have to do the one that doesn't serve you, which is the drink, the blanket stuff.
I have something else that I want to add to that, if I can.
Of course, please.
So care, compassion, grace, and accountability. We have to, as a society, as men, in our relationships with each other, we have to hold each other accountable, right? Accountable in many ways. When we agree to do something, we set out a goal and we agree to do it, and you share that with your buddy, and he's seeing you slacking up, right? Holds you accountable. Hey man, you said you were going to do that thing. What's going on, right? The grace, to give ourselves grace because we've experienced tremendous pain and suffering, but we survived it, right? And the act of surviving the pain and suffering in your body is still together. You haven't lost a limb or anything. That in itself, you must acknowledge the grace that you were given to come through the fire, right?
Bro, that's touches a nerve. I just saw Nicholas over the weekend. Took him up to the house, and I was stressing about I'm building a house and just absolutely stressing out about over how things are going because whatever could go wrong is going wrong, and it's just not meeting my expectations of what I thought it would look like. And you know, Nicholas turns to me and he says, brother, stop stressing about how far you need to go and look at how far you've come. And that, I just shut my mouth for a little while after that and just kind of processed what he said. So, you know, in terms of men's ability to be able to reach out to their buddies, their friends, and to maintain those interpersonal relationships that count as an additional safe space outside of their personal relationship, it is so extremely important. I urge men, women, everyone, you know, make sure you've got that safe space outside of your relationship, and also allow your partner to have that safe space outside of the relationship, because it's needed. It's really, really needed for maintaining one's mental health, you know, because, you know, Tarek Williams would have been a great person to bring on this show, like I was telling you. He had some really good points. Another friend of ours
Next time
next time he had some really good points on.
But shout out to him for doing what he can
Absolutely.
as well to push mental health,
Absolutely.
especially for men.
Yeah.
We appreciate him.
Yeah.
Dr. Andrew Charles, thank you so much again. I want to apologize one last time for pushing. You know, we really like to be devil's advocate on this, and you know, at no point was it ever meant to be. And I'm saying this because I'm self-conscious. I feel like my shadow self has, you know, appeared, you know, to maybe sort of push back and in some ways cover feelings that I have that I want to justify, but I also know that, you know, I need to address separately. But thank you for giving me the space and Jared the space to do this. This really was a pleasure talking to you, and I really hope that you can continue to share your knowledge and all the wonderful insights that you've done here with more people in Guyana. So wish you nothing but the best, and hopefully, you know, we can have another podcast in the future and maybe explore some other things that you know is very important, especially for people in our society. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and no need to apologize. I think this was a fruitful conversation, and I look forward to talking to you more.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Doc.